So, good afternoon, everyone. After 5 years of Alzheimer Europe, I'm suddenly on this side of the podium, which is very unsettling during the lunch debate. So, it's quite the experience to be on this side of it for a change. What I'm going to do today is introduce the Helsinki Manifesto and introduce Alzheimer Europe's European Parliament election campaign more broadly. So, as has been touched upon already, the European Parliament elections are going to take place next year between the 6th and the 9th of June. Obviously, all 27 member states will take part, and this will set the agenda for the next 5 years of European policy. So we've had it touched upon today about what some of the key messages are going to need to be during this campaign, and I'm going to talk you through this. And I'm also going to start off by just talking a little bit about what is the background to some of the previous campaigns that we've done. This is not Alzheimer Europe's first time campaigning, whether it be in the elections or whether it be through the production of a manifesto. So I want to just talk a little bit about where do we start off from, what have we done before, and how we got to the point that we are here today. And I'll talk you through the Helsinki Manifesto, our public call for action, and the European Dementia Pledge. And I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. So to begin with, going all the way back to 2006, this was marking the 100 years since Alzheimer's had been discovered by Alois Alzheimer. And this marked really the first kind of call, the first call to action at a political level, at a European level, for there to be action taken on dementia, for it to be prioritised as something that's not just dealt with at the national level by national governments, that this could be something dealt with at the European level and that needed to be funded. And you can see there the four actions of public health, of research and medical, care and social support, and legal and ethical matters. And you can see today that we are talking about very much the same things that we were talking about back then. The European Dementia Monitor is still identifying that these are the key issues which need to be addressed to varying degrees across Europe. Moving on to 2014, we published the Glasgow Declaration. This was an update to really reflect what progress had been made, but also to begin to adopt a more human rights-based approach. In that intervening period, there was the UNCRPD came into force, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, had come into force, and it really changed the paradigm of what we wanted to focus on there. Of course, we were still looking at it as a public health issue. We were still looking at research areas, but we really wanted to make sure that the voices of people with dementia and carers were heard, and that actually we didn't frame this as this would be a nice thing to do. We framed it as this is something that governments are obligated to do because they signed up to these international binding conventions, sorry. And in addition to this, we had the election campaigns in 2014 and 2019, in which we were very grateful for the support of members of the European Parliament and for candidates to say that actually they would use their position to amplify these messages and to really put pressure on decision makers in the Commission and the Council and in the Parliament that we could actually work together to really make change. And just one thing that I should mention there for the Glasgow Declaration, it was signed by over 11,000 individuals, 206 organisations at a European and national level, and by 153 policymakers at a national and a European level. There was real significant support for this. So we've learned from all of these campaigns, and this has informed the approach that we plan to take for this election. So to focus on what the key messages will be for this, we will really be pushing to show the number of people with dementia is increasing. Our 2019 yearbook has shown that we expected the number of people to double by 2050, and that this will require a significant action in terms of providing funding for services and supports nationally. We also want to identify the cost of dementia, which has been highlighted within the WHO's global status report on dementia. So that was a report which was done at the midway point for the global dementia, the public health response to dementia. We will be really highlighting that actually there are positive signs emerging. We've heard so far about the drugs which are beginning to be developed, the disease-modifying treatments, and that actually these are positive steps, but we need to make sure that that momentum continues and that this isn't lost, so that the dementia continues to be a priority within the research field. We've also heard quite extensively from the presentation that Jean's done on the monitor about the situation in relation to health and social care services. And finally, we want to, again, focus on disability rights, social rights, and the need for greater support for carers. So, how do we propose to do this? We want to take a three-pronged approach to this election. The first part will be the Helsinki Manifesto, which there's a copy of the manifesto on your tables. This will be Alzheimer Europe's guiding sort of document for our public affairs work for the next 5 years. Whenever we come to do our engagement with decision makers at a European level, this will be what we refer to. It has concrete measures in it that we want to see implemented and across health, across research, across disability rights and support for carers. There are a range of actions in there that we want to see taken, and we will be pushing those actions across the next 5 years. We will also, for this particular aspect, be asking for national and European organisations to support it and to endorse this manifesto to show their support. The public call for action will be aimed at the general public. It will be a short synthesis of the key numbers associated with dementia, so the prevalence, the cost, and asking people to show that they support dementia being made a priority at a European level. And finally, the Dementia Pledge will build on the actions that we've taken in 2019 and 2014, asking candidates at the European election to sign up and show their support upon their election to the European Parliament. So this, although we are launching and revealing this today, the campaign will kick off in earnest at the beginning of next year. So to begin, with the Helsinki Manifesto. This was adopted at our AGM in Helsinki in October, and it sets out the current position of dementia in Europe. It refers to some of the WHO reports. It refers to our own dementia monitor in terms of the cost of dementia and the prevalence. And it also calls for specific actions across health, research, disability, social rights, and support for informal carers. And there are actions both for the European Commission and also for national governments as well. So this will be something that we can use at a European level, but that our national member organisations can also use to lobby their governments. And you will see that these sort of 4 areas are sort of in line with the areas that were presented in the Dementia Monitor. So when we're able to go to these governments and say we want action, we can say the reason we want action is because there is a lack of availability of services, there's a lack of affordability of services, and we can use the two together to actually say, here's what we're asking for, and here's why. So just to give you, you can see that the Helsinki Manifesto is 6 pages long. I'm not going to go through each and every recommendation, unless you'd like me to. Otherwise, we can just go through these ones instead to show that actually we want a dedicated research mission included for dementia in the EU research programme, covering basic clinical science and care services. We want to see the funding allocated for dementia research brought into proportional level to its societal cost. So we want to see it brought to the level of other non-communicable diseases. We also want dementia prioritised in a future health programme with dedicated funding for projects and actions in line with other non-communicable diseases. We've had a European beating cancer plan. There's no reason why we couldn't have a European beating dementia plan. And finally, we want to see a European dementia plan there to coordinate these efforts. It's great to have programs in health. It's great to have research programs in social affairs, but these need to be coordinated if they're going to actually have an impact. And I think we've sort of heard people say before that actually it's great to have to take one bit of action or to do one bit of research, but if it doesn't translate and then actually make a difference to people's lives on the ground, then it's not worth doing. So we need all these different areas to be coordinated, and a European dementia action plan can do that. So for the public call to action, as mentioned for the Glasgow Declaration in 2014, we had over 11,000 people sign this. We think that it's really important to show the breadth of feeling across Europe in relation to dementia as a priority issue. So the call is quite short, it's straight to the point, it includes the prevalence figures, the cost, and it calls for action from European decision makers and then asks people to show their support. It will be translated into people's languages. So when people visit our site, whatever language their browser happens to be set to, that's where that's what will show up in the pledge. So we're really trying to make sure that actually this is accessible for as many people as possible, not just assuming that English is going to be spoken by everyone. And this is where we'll be asking our members really to help us to push this to get as wide an audience as possible to support this. So I won't read this out to you. I've already described a couple of times what is contained within it, but this is it. This is the call to action that we will be asking people to show their support for, and we will be hoping to get as many people as possible so that when it comes to us engaging with decision makers, we can say this number of people support us, this number of people think that dementia needs to be a priority issue. And for the final part of this presentation, this is the European Dementia Pledge. I think many of you will have seen this before in some iteration before. We have expanded on this very slightly, but you can see that those 4 areas: ensuring dedicated EU funding for dementia-focused research, responding to the scale of dementia as a health challenge, acknowledging dementia as a disability, and undertaking focused work to provide greater support for informal carers, are very much in keeping with the 4 areas of the Helsinki Manifesto. They reflect what is written in the public call to action. So each of these points, although they're very slightly differently worded, they have slightly different focus, there's a consistency across our messaging, whether it's decision makers, the public, or candidates for the election. And that is a whistle-stop tour of what we will be launching and be beginning in mid-January next year.
Sorry, do you want us any questions for Owen? I can't see any questions online, but if you have any questions online, please put your hand up or type in the chat in the room. Do we have any responses? Oh yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much, Owen, and thank you for outlining the roadmap and how we're going to go forward. I'd like to, the point you made about Dementia Action Plan and comparing it to what the Beating Cancer Plan that this European Parliament had, or the Commission had. I think when you look at the progress that Beating Cancer Plan made in terms of actions and real actions, they're very, very tangible. So I think it's a very, very, it's a very good comparison to make and say this is where we want to go with dementia, because as you can see coming from the Commission, we've had some real changes, and even still today now, we have a report going through next week on non-communicable diseases. So again, our actions in alcohol and screening, they've all been reiterated and they're part of the thinking now. So it's a very, very useful path to follow.
So it should be when we do our messaging and develop our messaging for next year, that should be a
and point to, I can pull out like where progress was made in cancer and what happened. Even in research, there was a strong support from the research area for cancer and clinical trials coming from that report. It went everything from, environment right through to end of life care. But I think it's a really useful comparison to make.
Okay, thank you.